Okay. Dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We have a lot of speakers on the list, given that we're covering the Enlargement Package 2025 that focuses on the Western Balkan countries and us as European Policy Center focusing on really trying to build bridges between Brussels and the Western Balkans, hence the title. And this is a traditional event that European Policy Center has been organizing. Luckily, in the past, we've had the European Commission joining us, which is again the case now. Besides that, we are always glad to have the possibility to rely on our Think for Europe network partners, which is a regional network comprising of think tanks from the Western Balkan 6. And we've been working since 2013. And I have the great pleasure as the moderator to have the wonderful panelists for today in order to unpack this highly anticipated enlargement package. I would like to note as well that this webinar is being recorded. You will be able to find it on YouTube. The whole webinar is supposed to last for 90 minutes. Although we could speak much longer, we wanted to really be precise on time, sharp, given that there's so many events on Enlargement Package as we speak. But I think what makes this webinar quite special is that not only is it a traditional event that we've been organizing, but another thing that makes it special is the fact that we're among the first ones to actually reach out to the wider audience with concrete details on the enlargement package, but also the details from each and every annual report from the Western Balkans. Another note is that unfortunately Marta Kos was prevented from joining us due to highly intensive work schedule. Nonetheless, we have a big pleasure to host Giulio Veneri, who is stepping in as an important asset to this webinar and who I'm sure will have a more than interesting presentation as a keynote speaker when it comes to his attempt to present the key points of the Enlargement Package 2025. A final remark is related to the whole concept. We are organizing this webinar as part of our Triple E program. Triple E is standing for Enlargement Expertise Expansion. This is the 7th edition. Normally, it's done under Chatham House rule, particularly targeting member states in order to boost capacities and increase knowledge on the enlargement policy. However, given the overall importance of the topic and high demand, we've decided to have this event organized as a public event. As I said, it will be recorded and then published on YouTube. And all of this is, of course, done thanks to the big support by the Open Society Foundation's Western Balkans. Moving forward, I would give the floor to Mr. Veneri. Afterwards, we would have Mr. Milosavljevic from Open Society Foundation giving his introductory remarks. And upon this introductory section, I would invite the audience to keep in mind the questions and comments they might have for Mr. Veneri, given that he might be obliged to leave a bit earlier this webinar. Of course, once this is done, we'll move to the Western Balkan experts. And upon their conclusion, we would give the floor to our colleague Srđan Majstorovic, who would wrap the whole discussion up, and to create a good and fertile ground for your subsequent questions and comments that would follow. So my aim as a moderator is not to speak any longer, to make it sure that we last for around 90 minutes. And without further ado, I give the floor to Giulio Veneri.
Thank you very much, Strahinja. I trust that I see you nodding, so I trust that you can hear my voice and you can see my office from Brussels. It's really a great pleasure to be with you guys today because you said something very important, that your mission is indeed to try to create bridges. And bridges, intellectually speaking, for us are very important. We want to hear your views. We want to hear your expectation. We want to hear your criticism, if there is any. And we want also to have the opportunity, like in this forum, to explain a little bit how we see things, so that maybe we find a common ground. A common ground for what? A common ground, I think, for making the enlargement happen, and making sure that the enlargement process will be a success. I think this should be hopefully the common goal here. And I will obviously elaborate on what do I mean by success, and how I see the opportunities for success to come. I think our reports are out there. As custom, we have published our package with a communication which accompanies the country reports. This is no novelties, and I'm sure that you have been dissecting the reports and looking at various pieces of assessment. So I will try to give you a little bit as a provocation, and as a provocation of exchange, not as a provocation as such, but just to provoke a little bit of exchange. Three main keywords that by going through the communication, I was seeing as more relevant than others, and the words are commitment, readiness, and the last one is opportunity. And on this last word, I think opportunity is a word that we have heard many times in the past few years. But I think you will allow me now to explain why we are at a different juncture, and why I see this as being more relevant than ever. Let me start with commitment. And it's clear to me that the focus for us this afternoon is the Western Balkans, but I will also give some hints which are relevant for Ukraine and Moldova. You will understand that it's also, I think, very important to make the link. Commitment is crucial. Commitment is crucial at this phase. This is my first key word. But it's not only crucial in the sense of the work that the Western Balkan countries, and of course Ukraine and Moldova, will have to do. It's also important in terms of at the Brussels level. So commitment for me is the key word in this juncture. We all know, we always tell to each other that if we look at the history of the enlargement, we always see that the friction between politics, or I should say the diplomatic world, and the technical work that is done has been very, very strong at times, with sometimes the political world pushing for certain objectives and sometimes pulling the handbrake. So we know that, we have seen that, but I think now that it's clear to everybody, and everybody supports the idea that the enlargement is a geostrategic imperative, and the mission of reuniting the European continent now more than ever needs to be pursued. I think in this moment politically we need to be very clear. Commitment is needed on our side, so member states will need to yield. We need to take important decision, and as well as it's important to have, of course, proven commitment to reform on the side of enlargement countries. So we always speak about the importance of reforms, of objectives being met on the side of enlargement countries, but I think it's important in this historical moment that we also talk about the commitment of EU member states to deliver, and we have seen that that once again it's the assessment of progress remains something very delicate, something very tricky, and I will explain in a few moments how I see this. And there are some decisions which we hope member states will take soon. As I said, I don't want to open too much of a Eastern parenthesis here, with the focus being on the Western Balkans, but of course it's under the eyes of everybody that the Commission has already made very clear that Ukraine and Moldova would be ready to start the engagement in the negotiations and open the fundamentals clusters as soon as possible. So commitment here is key and clear. Now, when I speak about the commitment of governments across enlargement countries, I naturally have to speak about progress, reforms, and readiness, overall readiness of countries to join. So the second key word for me is readiness. The process remains merit-based. First of all, it's not a race. I was listening to recent debate also yesterday, and there were questions being raised also to our commissioner in Parliament and in other fora of who's going faster and why there is a certain target for some countries and another aspiration has been endorsed for others. This is not a race. I like to quote one of my previous commissioners, Commissioner Hahn, who used to say, enlargement should be a highway like highways in Germany, where there is no speed limits. If countries are able to deliver on reform at faster pace, they should be able to go at faster pace. And if they don't deliver, tough luck. But this doesn't mean that we can make discounts, and we owe it to two cohorts. The first cohort is our citizens, because we need reforms that are bringing really tangible results for Europe to be more secure. But also we owe it to the citizens of the Western Balkans, and I want to hear also your view on this. I don't think we can allow to make discounts just for the sake of making a process happen. And that's why when it comes to readiness, the sub key words remains the fundamentals. You know very well that in February 2020, the Commission has presented a new, a revised enlargement methodology, where we have strengthened even more the fundamentals and the dimension and the relevance of the fundamentals in the context of the whole process. They must determine the pace of accession. And there is no discount on that. So for me, when we speak about readiness, we must speak about the fundamentals, and I'm sure you've seen the assessment of where country stands on the fundamentals. And I'm sure that everybody is aware that if now we have two countries which are moving at a different pace compared to others, is also because in the past few years, these countries have managed to ensure results. Some of these results pretty impressive with comprehensive reforms. I'm thinking obviously of the justice reform in Albania and the vetting that was triggered with it, which enabled, sorry for keeping with the metaphor of the car, but enabled this country to change gear and catch up with the process. And I remember a few years ago when Albania was asked to do all this change, not even being a candidate country. And I remember there was a certain anxiety in the establishment saying, I'm sorry, but countries are negotiating, Serbia and Montenegro negotiating, and they're still in the plan of doing justice reform. Why do you ask us? And we had back then all this narrative about the fundamentals first being made, and we explained, well, tough luck. Our approach, based also on lessons learned from previous enlargement, is that we need to front load the work on the fundamentals and on rule of law in particular, regardless of where a country stands in the pipeline or whether a country is negotiating, is a candidate or is a potential candidate. So this is our vision, and we pushed for this reform to happen. And when this offer was intercepted with determination, like in the case of Albania, then you had this result. The country made an incredible leap in the past few years, and that's why we are now talking about, we are monitoring interim benchmarks, and we are talking about how to complete the opening of all clusters. It's only one cluster left for Albania, and then Albania will be negotiating at full speed. So merit, thoroughness, as I said, thoroughness of reforms, of course, for Europe, but most importantly, for the citizens who deserve reforms in the rule of law. And I didn't mention public administration reform, but I want to, because also if you look at the countries, especially across the Western Balkans, and you notice where performance is a little bit better, this is also linked to a more stable public administration. So I think the countries that in the past few years underwent more ambitious reforms in PAR and PFM, including reform of the civil service, which was done in a serious way, these countries and those who are a little bit more advanced than other have managed to secure better results, to have a stronger dialogue also with us, to have a machinery that can face the challenge of accession in much better ways. And of course, then it boils down to political decisions when it comes to reform. It boils down to motivation. It boils down to geopolitical positioning of certain countries. And I think I can give you a hint and I stop it there, but you understand what I mean. But to have structures underneath which do the job with dedication, I can tell you, and I worked in position both in geographic teams here and also from horizontal perspective. So I interacted with administration across enlargement countries, including East. I can see that the countries who are doing better are those who were also on the side of public administration reform. There was a change of gear, including with serious civil service reform. My final and concluding word, I said, and I wanted to keep really this even under the 10 minutes that you promised, Strachnia, because I want to hear, as you mentioned, also the very valuable speaker and possibly an exchange. The last keyword is opportunity. I think our commissioner has been very clear since her first days in office. There is an incredible opportunity now. Yes, it's happening because geopolitics is going at a different pace and in different direction. We all face a little bit of uncertainty. It's linked also to the fact that there's been an attempt or large-scale invasion in Ukraine, and the war is still ongoing with relentless efforts from Russia to try to conquer more land and to make Ukrainian citizens struggle every day. So these things have changed our geopolitical menu, and because of these and other elements, it's clear that the enlargement has now raised to the level of top priority. It was not. We can be honest with each other. In the past decade, we were working, trying to consolidate reforms, try to move things forward, but we knew that the appetite for enlargement wasn't there. So now there is a great opportunity. The train is passing now. There is an agreement, there is consensus, and we know enlargement requires unanimity and consensus throughout. There is a unanimity, there is agreement, there is political coherence, with, of course, some deviation and some support that sometimes comes, sometimes goes when it comes to certain countries. But overall, we all agree that this is a top priority. The train is now, the opportunity has to be seized, must be seized by enlargement country. This is my hope, and I think the message in the package is very clear that on the side of the Commission, we maintain our support and we maintain our vision that we must turn this into a success story. And also, when it comes to opportunities, we are pushing gradual integration as much as we can, with, however, a caveat. This should not be seen as an alternative to accession. I want to be very clear with that. So opportunities are there. We are trying to offer those. Some of them are very, very tangible and visible. See SEPA, see the Rome Like Home process, etc. Benefiting from also some of the feature of the single market. These are all things that we are trying to do, involving countries in our expert groups and starting to involve them in processes that informal policymaking is also being done. But this should not be seen as a parking, as an alternative, as something, okay, we do this so that government sees we are giving something. No, we give something because we believe that this can help us also to show, and I conclude, the benefits in a very tangible way. I worked on the Western Balkans since many years, and one of my first tasks was the visa liberalization dialogue. And I remember that then everybody understood, but this was 16 years ago, 15 years ago from some countries, and with the prospect of membership fading and being there but not being there for citizens, it's clear that for many years Europe lost a little bit the grip. So we need to reset. We need to make a better communication effort also on our side. And we need to continue, and this is really my last word, pushing governments to do one thing. I have many people in this room who are representative of a very important civil society organization. I'm going to quote my commissioner. She has been using this as a flagship message everywhere she's going, and she means it a lot. We need to push governments to turn the accession process in a society whole approach, in the context of which, and this is what the commissioner has been very clear, and she's giving the example also by dedicating her time also to engage with civil society as much as possible in her missions, including by empowering the civil society to contribute across the various strands. And I have some previous job experience as I worked as political desk on some countries in the Balkans, and I've seen with my eyes how much across sector, from agriculture to rule of law, is not only about anti-corruption and justice NGOs. It's across sectors, from agriculture to the rule of law and fundamental rights and so on and so forth, that I've seen the quality and the difference that the civil society can make. So I hope in a new partnership with the civil society, we are committed to the new partnership. We need the civil society for all its activities, for advocacy, for being also ambassadors of European integration where relevant, for flagging issues to the Commission, for finding ways to discuss way forward. We need a full-fledged partnership. I thank you very much for this opportunity, Strajna. Hvala vam puno na vaše vremena. It's a great pleasure for me to listen now to the other speakers, and I will stay as much as I can. I think 1 hour until 4 o'clock, and if there is question time, I'll try to address those questions. Molim.
Hvala, naravno, nema na čemu. Thank you, Giulio. And indeed, this is, I would say, a renewed partnership that keeps on delivering. I think this partnership is gaining in importance as we see that enlargement is indeed progressing at an unprecedented speed. However, we should never relax, and indeed, we should anticipate challenges and jointly work to find solutions to these challenges, which are not often nation specific, but have joint importance to the entire region as well. With that said, I'd like to mention to the audience that the Q&A section down below in the lower bar, you can find Q&A option, or there, if you want to place a question for Mr. Veneri, please do. We already have one question. If you prefer the chat box, that works as well. So I encourage you, while we have another introductory speaker, to think of those questions, place them, and we would kindly ask Mr. Veneri to refer to them before we start unpacking the enlargement package from the national perspectives. And now, without further ado, I'd like to draw attention to the Open Society Foundation's Western Balkans. That is our close colleague, Miodrag Milosavljevic, who's been really one of the most known faces of enlargement, and without whose support this event, among other things, would not have been possible. So, Miodrag, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Nemanja. Thank you, Mr. Veneri, as well. Yes, let me also thank you for the invitation, for the opportunity to speak at this. I think it's now a traditional event happening immediately after the release of the enlargement package. It's not only traditional, but it's necessary. And looking at the attendance also of this meeting, it's clear. I don't remember when I had like 170 people online for the event, so kudos to you and for that. I'm connecting from Vrnjačka Banja. It's town of in the south of Serbia, where we work on one complementary, let's say, but also the European policy, but also national policy. It's a green agenda where we want to try to introduce more renewables in our municipalities, in our local self-governments, and basically responding to what Mr. Veneri said when he was quoting Madam Kos, actually creating the EU accession as a society whole approach. Basically, we try to involve not just and engage not only top down, but also from local communities to work with the people to try to translate what the EU means for micro societies, for local societies, and how we can actually accelerate it from that perspective, because it's sometimes the picture is detached and far away, especially having in mind the EU integration being the moving target. For us in the Open Society Foundation Western Balkans, there is no doubt EU integration is the main developmental agenda, and it is our strategic investment in prosperity of the region, basically, and that's it. Like I don't want to explain it with more words. We do also appreciate partnership with civil society, with the academia, with the governments in the region, but also the European Commission and DG in charge, NS in charge of enlargement, for great cooperation on that. Just a couple of words on our cooperation with CEP, with the European Policy Center. I think we worked from the very beginning when the organization was established back in 2011, I think. And ever since, we've been working on accelerating EU integration in the beginning of Serbia and then the entire region since 2023. Open Society Foundations Western Balkans is basically regional entities, not anymore like national entities in each of the countries, because we have a common goal to pursue. Basically, that's it. Also, we try to transform ourselves also to be in the best shape to support the EU integration of the region. Let me just mention one of the cornerstone, I think, cornerstones of our cooperation. This is the stage accession model. Back a couple of years ago, we supported CEP and also partners from Brussels, but also from across the region to develop that agenda, which was kind of seen as one potential way out of the stalemate that we had at the time. Luckily, since then we have change of the situation in the EU, and we have this opportunity, and we decided to embark on this opportunity and to bet on that. And this is what the work of the Open Society Foundations is all about. Now, at the core of our engagement is basically, until the full integration of the region happens, is actually to try to provide and allow citizens of the Western Balkans to experience the benefits of the EU integration even before the enlargement happens. This is how we build support in the region for the process, but also engagement, because without engagement, I'm not sure that we will see a lot of success. But also, it is kind of it helps again I would say surging Euroscepticism, let's say, not only in the region but across the board. What we also learned from our work with CEP and the partners is that it's not only enough to include Western Balkans and Brussels in these debates, and these seminars actually and webinars actually prove that we must go beyond that. We must go and talk to national parliaments in the EU member states. We need to speak to national administrations, and I think this is where our focus, one of our focus areas, will be in coming period in this. For some countries in the region, luckily, and I like to believe, the last stretch of negotiations that we are entering now. One of the things that actually I would like to just to demonstrate the way how we also work with our partners. Also, we try to provide or open some avenues. I remember one project that basically also grew from let's say seed initiative that we started with EPI, and now with the EU funded EU support, it grew into the Western Balkans reform and growth monitor, because we saw like the EU as well, the growth plan as a key framework in which we can basically frame also our engagement and support our partners. And I would also like to direct your attention to reformmonitor.org, where you can see also the data on the implementation of growth plan. It's not only us supporting others to do things. Open Society Foundations also works in operational mode, operational projects. And let me just mention one of the initiatives. It is Ignita platform. Just a couple of weeks ago, we met in Prizren. We tried to gather the entire community that deals with the integration in the Balkans across the sectors, from civil society, decision makers, academia, media, also thinkers from Europe and beyond, to discuss how we can accelerate the EU integration of the region. And I think it was super successful. But this is not something that happens once. It's not a one-off event. This is something that gradually emerged from our engagement with the Berlin process and organizing a civil society and think tank forum back then in 2003 in Tirana, and that's the birthplace of Ignita Forum and this platform, which now works to in different ways to accelerate the integration of the region. Finally, let me just mention a couple of ways of our engagement. Just recently, and we would like to commend the European Commission for that also, we took part in discussions on EU's civil society strategy, because these formats we see as the formats that enable amplification of voices also of the people of the Western Balkans in the European arena. In this framework, we believe that this amplification of voices of the citizens of the Western Balkans within their future community is necessary, because they have to feel and have to have a proof of the ways of how they can engage on shaping the future of their future community. And I would like to commend this process also on the side of the European Commission. Also, something that we are really proud of is our cooperation with the European Economic and Social Committee. We worked a lot with them jointly to bring on board social partners from across the Western Balkans to take part in the work of the European Economic and Social Committee. And we can proudly say that now they are almost fully involved in the work of the committee. This is one of the demonstrations of the gradual accession and or staged accession, and how it can be successful. And we see and we have from the contacts with other institutions, we see that there is a lot of interest of similar exercises across the board. Finally, just recently we supported a number of civil society organizations from across the candidate countries to participate and to advocate for the enlargement budget within MFF, next MFF, because it's, and with this I can wrap up, because it is important not only for us at the Open Society Foundation, but also for the EU and for all the other actors to put our money as well where our mouth is. And I think that is the key of our success, working together and basically investing in the same direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To be honest, and even from personal perspective, all the milestones you have mentioned is like music to my ears. I think it's quite a testament to your hard work and dedication. When I say you, I mean you and your team, which increases in importance if you consider the global trends, which are not favorable towards think tank or civil society empowerment. So we encourage you to continue with your good work. And before I move on, I'd like also to say, indeed, 170 something participants is quite a feat. I should like to note as moderator that we have participants from basically all member states, including all countries from the region. So all the things that we cover today will definitely be heard all across Europe, which I think is very important, because we have media present, think tanks, but also policy experts and embassies. Without further ado, I thank both speakers for their remarks. I would like to read two questions that we have from the audience. Both are from Mr. Veneri, and then I would start asking the colleagues to present their assessment of the national packages. The first question is by Beatrice Piri. Her question is the following. We know that next week the EU will adopt the European Democracy Shield, including the new civil society strategy, which is also extended to candidate countries. So the question is, could you give us some anticipations on how the Commission plans to include civil society in the Western Balkans in this new and important strategy? So that is one question. Another question is made by my colleague Milena, who can now unmute herself and pose it personally to Mr. Veneri.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Veneri. Since you work at the strategy directorate in DG Enest, I wanted to actually ask one question which is related to the strategy and which I found quite interesting in this year's communication, and it relates to the preparation of the future accession treaties. There is an interesting statement which says that in the new accession treaties, there will be a need for more robust and wider safeguard clauses. This is something that we have advocated as part of our staged accession proposal. It was especially emphasized in the revised proposal from 2023. Strahinja is actually also writing a paper on the safeguard clauses and how we're trying to actually deepen this proposal of ours. In the staged accession model, what we argued for is that the duration of the period after accession in which the safeguard clauses could be triggered, should be prolonged from the previous examples of around 3 years to a longer period of up to 10 years in duration. And we also argued for the widening of the scope of the safeguard clauses, especially in the area of rule of law, since in the previous accession treaties, they were very much focused on specific aspects of the rule of law and fundamentals, whereas we believe that the safeguard clauses should be extended to cover the entire area of fundamental values and the rule of law. So I would like just to get your reaction and maybe some additional information and updates on this aspect. And also, if we have time, I don't know, this issue is not mentioned in the strategy, but it was very much in the public eye in the previous weeks due to a political article which was issued a couple of weeks ago. It also relates to one of the proposals of the staged accession, which is related to the limiting of the veto powers of new member states after accession. Is this something that is being actively pursued? We have seen a lot of updates and a lot of reactions, including a question to Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday at the Enlargement Summit in Brussels. So I would be also interested if you have any information there that you can share with us. I would be also interested in a reaction on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these questions, and thank you, Milena, for flagging that you guys are working on something which is indeed very, very interesting and very important, which is how to design a future accession treaty. I'll start from this question because I and then of course I will address Beatrice's question because this is indeed a very important point. We have a revised methodology since 2020. I think we have cast light rightly on a number of criticalities which this methodology tries to address in terms of how we make the accession happen. But then when the accession happens, I think also based again on lessons learned from previous waves, it's very important that the new treaties foresee some update and upgrade because we need to reflect a reality. Also, you know very well that since a few years the Commission has started to release reports on the state of the rule of law on member states. So this was not the case until only a few years ago, but it shows that the Union also drawing some lessons from the accession process and the accession and how the accession process was ongoing in the past few years. We have also started to reflect a little bit on ourselves. So it's also about looking ourselves in the mirror. When I say ourselves, I say member states. Okay, so the importance of the rule of law is clear, and I think there is always this chicken egg discussion on what's more important, what comes first, is rule of law or democracy. And some people try to tend that democracy is really what's important, but I like to say that with no rule of law being fully entrenched, you don't have democratic resilience. And in this historical moment, we are witnessing with our eyes how important it is not only to have a full functioning democracy, but to have a democracy that is resilient to attacks from abroad and from within. And if you don't entrench fully the rule of law, if you don't respect certain parameters, including, sorry for sounding anachronistic and old-fashioned, à la Montesquieu, with truly empowered, independent, and accountable judiciary that can do its job as a pillar of the state and not as a pillar that is subdued to political pressure and pressure of other sorts, you don't get freedom. Our citizens, there's always going to be corruption because it's the rule of the money, the rules, and not the rule of the law. So I think this is something on which we need to be very, very clear. In the past few years, the attention on the rule of law has changed. We have told ourselves that we need to be more attentive in Europe to democracy, to defend democracy, but also to pursue reforms to entrench the rule of the law. And in the rule of law report, we started also to issue recommendation to member states, including on the track record against corruption, which was something that we never had there. It was something that we were not looking at even. But this has changed. So I think it's natural. The more Europe looks at itself, the more we try to address the weaknesses also that have struck our system. The healthier it is to have accession treaties which reflect the new situation. I mean, we cannot have the same accession treaties as that we had 2 and more decades ago. I mean, this is clear. And also we owe it to the citizens because we always speak about reforms being irreversible. I mean, I think everything can be reversed up to a certain point, but we really need to make sure that we reach a level of sophistication, but in a good sense, of our conditionality, so that when reforms happen and when institutions start to live their own life, it's difficult to undo things. And I'm thinking in particular, as I mentioned already, on the judiciary. Of course, there can always be new reforms, new attempts politically to hamper institution, but when you have had solid institution building and also the awareness, the self-awareness within institution has grown, then it's difficult. So there you start to have irreversibility. So I think it's healthy, I think it's necessary, and I think that stronger safeguards, clear and stronger safeguards, are an healthy evolution. We also have a much clearer and stronger conditionality. Someone was, I think Miodrag, you did mentioning also the reform agendas which we have issued. This is showing how much we are starting to look at clear conditionality from a different angle, and we need a stronger safeguard to prevent backsliding. I mean, this is clear. So commitments that were taken during the accession process cannot all of a sudden become, just because of a change of government, subject to political debate. So either that commitment stays, or there is an issue. That's why you need clauses with strong safeguards in the new treaty. So this is something that we are thinking about, we are discussing, but we look forward, Milena and Strahinja, if you, when you finalize your paper, please send it over. We will look at it with a lot of attention, and maybe we can also have a little bit of a discussion. So thank you for working on that. Beatrice was asking about the new strategy for civil society. Of course, you understand that this document is still being finalized, so I can't really say much, but working on a service that is responsible to all the reign of the accession process and relations with Western Balkans and other enlargement partners, including relation with the civil society, you can be sure that the point has been made and has been discussed across the Commission to have in this strategy, where is feasible and when is relevant, also a very simple principle to embed, to integrate CSOs, partners from enlargement countries, also in action that the new document will foresee in different strands of work for civil society representatives, civil society agents from member states, from within member states. So this is a principle that we have tried to enshrine in the new strategy, and I think it's still a week from adoption, but I trust that you will see some important news. But the spirit of our contribution as DGNS to this document was mostly this, which was well received, and we are discussing and fine tuning. So I can't say much more than that, but I trust that there's going to be a good document ahead to offer new opportunity for the partnership we were talking about, Strahin, just a few moments ago. On the last question, I think it's thank you for raising it. It's good that there is a little bit of political discussion on options, and I think it shows how much the enlargement is on the radar of everyone. So many articles also coming out. I read the article you meant, but I can't comment much on that. There are things that are floated left and right. I think the treaty is very clear, but when it comes to decision making and rights, I think this is one of the fundamental aspects of and the fundamental responsibilities also that is given to member states to have a vote. So with the current treaty, I think things are rather clear. I mean, then in the future, if there are reforms, every scenario is possible. But I think we have clarity now, and it's good that options are floated around. But I don't think that without major treaty reforms, one could envisage different type of modulations with both. But this is just my reading of a text that is quite clear. I think our treaty on what membership entails. Voila. So thank you for the questions, for these 3 questions, and the floor is back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, because we're running behind schedule just a little bit. We have one more question, and if you could reply maybe in half a minute. It's related to North Macedonia, posed by Fishnik. North Macedonia was mentioned by Marta Kos during yesterday's presentation. However, is there any plan to address this issue, the fact that the constitutional changes have yet to take place and that Bulgaria is blocking North Macedonia? So the question is, how does the EU plan to guarantee that there are no more blockades from Bulgaria moving forward? But very briefly.
I mean, very briefly, I can only say that there are clear council conclusions, and the way forward is clear. This is not about an individual member state blocking. There is a council that has taken a decision. So I think I need to be very clear on that. The avenue was shown, and then there were political decisions not to go for that avenue. But the council conclusions are clear, and these are conclusions of the council. So these were unanimously adopted by the EU member states. So I think that the recipe for success is there, and it's clear. Thank you so much.
Completely understood. Thank you very much for your time. Of course, Julia, we encourage you to stay and listen to the rest of the experts, who I can tell based on their physical movement that they can't wait to speak up and share their thoughts on their country's perspectives. So I'm opening up this new section of the webinar. And to make it even more dynamic and interesting, I have prepared actually a set of polls for the audience to answer, which would actually create a fruitful context for the panelists to build up with their presentations based on those questions. So I would like to start with Instituto Alternativa, that is with Dragana, who would discuss the annual report on Montenegro, Montenegro being a true and genuine frontrunner in this process. So now I'm launching a poll. Can you see it? Yes. So each poll will have 2 questions. So the first question is, how would you assess Montenegro's level of preparedness? So it's a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being from early stage, 5 being well advanced. Upon answering this question, the second one would relate to your assessment whether there was a change of preparedness in contrast to last year. So do you think that Montenegro in this case progressed, stagnated, and backslid? Upon maybe the next 5 or 10 seconds, I would share the results, and then Dragana can take it from there. Okay, I'm getting a lot of answers as we speak. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm ending the poll. And I'm sharing the results. Here, Dragana, you will see that most people believe that basically Montenegro is on a scale from 1 to 5, in between moderate and good level of preparation, which is an interesting observation. And then that actually an absolute majority, 2/3 of people believe that there was actually a progress from one report to another. With that said, I give the floor to you.
Thank you, Strahinja. So for my first, and hello everyone from Podgorica, I would like to say that everyone actually participating was really close to, at least when we speak about the majority of answer, because Montenegro is there somewhere between being moderately prepared and having a good level of preparation when it comes to the, let's say, overall preparedness in the EU integration process. So if we take a look at the assessment, this is one very positive and very encouraging report for Montenegro, especially when we translate the assessment into the numbers. So what I just said is that when it comes to the average readiness and preparedness for all chapters, we actually are at 3.45, which means we are between being moderately and having a good level of preparation in general. When it comes to progress, compared to previous report, we actually achieved a very good process since now we are at point of 3.63, which is really good compared to previously having 3.21. So if we take a look at clusters, the best average readiness score is actually in cluster 6, which is external relations. And then the next one is actually cluster 1, fundamentals, which is actually, let's say, one of the key clusters when it comes to our negotiation process. But what I also would like to mention that actually the lowest readiness score we do have in cluster 5 related to resources, agriculture, and cohesion. So speaking about specific clusters, so now I'm just trying to go over this technical part. Speaking about specific chapters, beside the rule of law area, where actually significant reforms have yet to be implemented, I will speak about that very soon. Actually, huge efforts should be made in 3 chapters where we actually do have lowest grades, and those are chapter 27, chapter 33, and chapter 2, where we actually have only some level of preparation. So those 3 chapters are those one where we think that our government and actually all stakeholders participating in enlargement process should push really hard in order to reach goals set by our government, but also expected by not only public but European Commission as well. So that's about this technical part. When we look deeper in the report, we can see that actually this report reiterates some numerous assessments and recommendations that we had from previous period. Even we tried to compare, some of them are similar, for example, to the report that we had in 2018. And this is especially regards some of the key areas in fundamental chapter, of course, related to judiciary, public administration reform, and of course, cooperation with civil society. So if you compare assessment, general overview in these chapters now and back in 2018, we can see, let's say, similar messages. But over the long term, we can see that progress can be seen in certain areas. Among other things, the European Commission actually recognized progress in, for example, handling war crimes. We can also see some indication of more effective and determined criminal justice response, as well as better track record when it comes to prosecuting high-level corruption and organized crime. But however, when we go deeper in recommendations, we see that when it comes to cluster of fundamental rights, they are more specific this year. So we compared those recommendations from the last year's report, and we saw that, for example, in some cases where we had more general recommendations, they are now more concrete, where Commission is trying, let's say, to have recommendations and even to track them more easily. I will give just one of the example, and it's related to reducing the backlog of cases across the entire judiciary. But for example, in this year's report, European Commission specifically emphasize 3 institutions where they expect reduction of cases, and we think that this is something that European Commission will specifically look through entire year. So when it comes to rule of law area, because this is, but also fundamental chapter, because this is the one most related to areas that Institute Alternative is covering. We are still waiting for formal convictions for high-level cases. We also need some of the key preconditions when it comes to fighting corruption. Here we still speak, for example, about capacities of special police units, special state prosecutor's office, but what we also still need is basic work conditions, such as adequate place to work and operate. And this is something that is also reflected in the recommendations. When it comes to the fundamentals, also electoral reform should be fully conducted in transparent and consultative manner. What I would like specifically to emphasize is that European Commission, beside those positive assessment and giving better, let's say, scores, and even in those chapters that we actually closed, concretely speaking about chapter 5, where we thought that, let's say, the work is done. In this report, we actually saw 3 completely new recommendations when it comes to the chapter public procurement. So this chapter is provisionally closed in June 2025, but we actually see that Commission will strictly follow those recommendations, mostly related on preventing corruptive practices in public procurement procedures. But also one thing that raised a lot of questions, not only in our public media and so on, but also in opposition and also on EU level, is government-to-government agreement with United Arab Emirates. And this year we do have clear recommendation from European Commission that they will actually pay specific attention how these agreements actually relate to EU standards when it comes to public procurement. So I would like also just to mention 3 very important things that we also recognized in the report. Speaking about that, how despite positive assessment and some things going in right direction, European Commission is still strictly focused on preconditions for really crucial reforms. One of these is also law on free access to information, because even though we had the adoption by the government, adoption in parliament is still pending, and this is one of the crucial things for civil society, but also media investigative work. We also see that the European Commission also stressed a lot of attention to our capacities, specifically speaking about Ministry of Interior and how actually human resource management is in our police directorate. Mr. Veneri mentioned importance of public administration reform, and what we actually saw in this area is that most of recommendations from the previous period actually remained unfulfilled, although in this report we can see, let's say, more strict recommendations when it comes to having, for example, employments based on merit. What was actually interesting in our case, and I will try to close my first iteration with this, is that during this year we actually had changes of our law on civil servants and state employees, and we actually tried to include that acting officials cannot actually be outside of the public administration system, and this is something that was firstly in the draft. But when this draft law arrived to the government, and they actually didn't want to have it in final proposal, and at that time Minister of Public Administration said we cannot close negotiation process without having this in our law. And at that time that seemed like, okay, this is something very specific it don't seem like something that should actually stop our negotiation process. But now, when we take a look at the report, we actually see that this year a report openly criticized that this regulation for the status of acting officials is actually excluded from that law, which seems that really the European Commission paid attention to those specific things when it comes to aligning with EU standards, even in those public administration specificities. So, as I said, maybe those are the most interesting things that we actually discovered during our first reading of the report, but I'm free to answer any other questions and follow up in maybe my second iteration. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I mean, I believe that all eyes were on Montenegro, given that their true commitment now, given their front-runner status. And I like the fact you mentioned that the job is not done when you close the chapter. It continues being monitored, and I think this is a good lesson for others that have yet to start closing the chapters, in particular that chapter on the public procurement. Without further ado, I'd like to now give the floor to Daniel. And before he addresses you, again, I'm launching another poll with the same questions as before. So please, within maybe 15 seconds, answer what do you think, where does Albania stand now, and how this compares to previous years' report. The picture I can already see is a bit more nuanced here when it comes to the overall preparedness, whereas it's very interesting when it comes to progression. Okay, I'm ending the poll. 3, 2, 1, ending poll. And I'm sharing the results. Here, as you can see, most votes are in moderate corner, but we can see that they are also spread out from some level of preparedness to even almost well-advanced level of preparedness. As to the second question, we see that there's a belief that Albania now has this new front-runner status. It has indeed progressed. So, Daniel, please give us your take on these results and on the annual report.
Thank you, Strainia. First of all, yeah, the results of the poll kind of mirror the assessment of the Commission. Myself personally, I would like to see the situation through the eyes of the one that voted well advanced. That sounds pretty optimistic. So it seems that nowadays most events on Albania's accession process seem to be explained through some combination of three phrases: momentum, front runner, and EU by 2030. So I will try to avoid them and modestly try to expand the vocabulary on commenting on accession developments. And when discussing the country report, I must begin with the context. When we gathered last year in the same webinar, Albania had just opened the fundamentals cluster, the first one. And now we are preparing to open the final one. And this is undeniably a positive step and a very tangible result of the goodwill on both sides of the negotiating table to move things forward. And at last, the attention will shift from press conferences announcing the opening of clusters to the actual effort of closing them and maintaining the reform quality. And I think that this is what the story on the country reports should be about, to check their preparedness rather than applauding political performances. And allow me to share with you some of the findings from the country report, an overview of the main data that I assure you was not AI generated, however ironic that might sound coming from Albania these days. The report tells us that the commitment and steering from the public administration is still there, as it was last year and the year before, since this renewal started, but it hasn't necessarily transformed into a reform rhythm that fully matches that commitment and that ambition. Compared to last year, Albania has registered a slight improvement in 6 chapters, 2 in cluster 2, 3 in cluster 3, and 1 in cluster 4. For comparison, last year, Albania improved in 4 chapters compared to the previous year. So this year, 2 chapters more. So yes, there is a better performance, although it is unclear whether it's sufficient to meet the 2027 target for concluding negotiations. And using our network scoring system, Albania this year stands at 2.89 on a scale from 1 to 5, as it was explained. a modest increase of 0.9 points from last year. This in terms of preparedness. In terms of yearly progress, 6 chapters progressed better this year compared to last, while in 5 chapters we saw that progress was slowed down compared to the progress they had in 2024. And these include free movement of goods, consumer protection, which is still at an early stage and sees no advancement. Digital transformation had a slower progress this year despite being a government priority, and social policy and employment and environment and climate change, 2 chapters which struggle regularly. When we look at cluster performance, we see that Albania performs best in cluster 6, external relations, and cluster 3, competitiveness, both above average, while the remaining 4 clusters remain below average. So overall, Albania's performance, as the polls indicated, rightly so, is slightly above average, with 22 out of 33 chapters rated at a moderate or a higher level of preparation. These are the facts, the data. However, interpreting them grows trickier every year, mainly because it seems now that we are missing a crucial reference point, which is what exactly constitutes a satisfactory level of accession readiness in measurable terms. In other words, what parameters are we aiming at to say that we now could ask for the green light for accession? And therefore, it is also becoming increasingly difficult also to reconcile the political narrative of being almost there with the performance indicators that are found in the reports. But beyond the numbers and what they tell us, we can see that certain patterns emerge when diving into the report's text. And the report tells a familiar story of modest gains in some areas, driven more by the need to satisfy these EU requirements than by domestic policymaking priorities, and stagnation in the majority of other areas. And we see that progress comes easily in the low-hanging fruits, such as adopting strategies or legal acts, but implementation suffers, and so does also the transposition of EU directives. We also notice something which might be concerning. We also notice that when the interests of EU accession requirements clash with interests of existing power structures in the public or private sphere, the latter tend to prevail. And the report illustrates this in the media section. The report recognizes the progress in establishing a structured dialogue on media regulation, which happened in the last year in Albania, a necessary but non-threatening measure, I have to say, while also noting with concern the eviction of a media outlet from publicly owned premises by the police, which caused some backlash among national actors. Meanwhile, as the Commission repeats year after year that many of its recommendations remain unfulfilled or only partially addressed, we as civic actors must likewise repeat year after year our mantra that EU accession process still suffers from a chronic transparency and consultation deficit on the local level, national level. The inclusion of civic actors remains frustratingly and disappointingly inadequate. This is compounded also by the slow death of purpose-driven NGOs in the last year or 2 years. Our role now in policy formation is weak. Our monitoring capacity is crippled by poor transparency standards in public administrations and institutions. Our ability to advocate and mobilize civic groups is undermined by delegitimization campaigns and ineffective funding practices by donors. And as a recent European media article observed, we are being reduced to service contractor service provisions, which are permitted to implement programs, but discouraged from commenting or influencing the very policies we help to execute. But unfortunately, Parliament has it a bit worse too. Its role in overseeing government actions in the accession process is ineffective, as the report notes, and it fails to accommodate open, inclusive dialogue between institutions and civic actors. A recent proposal, legal amendment by members of Parliament, to change the law on the role of the Parliament in the EU accession process and to legally codify fast-track parliamentary procedures for approving all laws that are needed to satisfy EU accession requirements, is telling of the regard they hold for the institution they serve at. And it also reinforces our concern that reform urgency is being pursued at the expense of reform quality sometimes. And this was also noted during the presentation of the country report by the EU ambassador in Albania. And finally, a last point. So this lack of genuine and inclusive dialogue, which persists, at least in Albania. And sometimes poor communication has alienated national civic actors and the public from the EU accession process, and this remains true. Nonetheless, we are in the last stretch, it seems so. And this is evident because when our region has had the chance to exchange experiences, for example, with peers from the Baltic countries or the Visegrad countries, everyone there, from public officials of all strands of power to civic actors to ordinary citizens, they all have a story to tell about how integration happened from their perspective. The concern is that when and if Albania joins the EU, only public officials in Brussels and Tirana, along with a small bubble of policy insiders, will know how it happened. The rest will have no story to share with others. Thank you.
What a way to close the speech. Speechless. Jokes aside, really, this is a good message to all, that even when you get this frontrunner status, you're not free of mistakes, you're not free of your flaws. I think that this warrants even more attention, even stronger monitoring, and even more important role of civil society to really ensure that having a frontrunner status actually means something in practice. So thank you very much for your remarks. And I'd like now to turn to Milena, my colleague Milena from European Policy Center, to discuss the annual report on Serbia. And of course, as before, let me quickly share a poll on Serbia. This one is going to be interesting for sure. So let's have 5 more seconds.
It's important to state that we as panelists cannot vote. We are not voting.
You're not skewing the results.
Yes.
Good. 3, 2, 1. I think the results are quite convincing, and I'm ending the poll now. The results are shared. We can see Serbia, definitely a strong majority believes that it has some level of preparation, much lower than the previous 2 countries in question, and that there's a mix in between stagnation and a backsliding, which is quite an interesting finding. So Milena, play with these data.
Thanks. So definitely the majority assessment of the participants is not aligned with what the Commission is saying. It's actually more aligned with my personal assessment. In fact, Serbia is currently moderately prepared, and it has been for the past, well, practically 10 years. There's been very, very incremental progress from year to year in terms of overall preparedness, which today stands at 3.14 when counting also the sub-areas of the fundamentals cluster, which are assessed from the perspective of preparedness. Because not all of them are. Just last year, that level of preparedness was 3.11. So this is allegedly a certain level of progress of 0.03. I would say that this assessment is not fully aligned with the reality. Most of us who work on new integration of Serbia have multiple arguments and evidence to show that actually Serbia has indeed backslid. And this is where I think the assessment of the majority of participants is quite on spot. And in fact, looking at this year's report, the strongest impression is the level of criticism that has been expressed in the report. Which definitely is the most critical that we have seen to date, at least since I've been dealing with the EU accession process, which has been for the past 20 years. Very strong language, a very detailed and nuanced analysis of the developments in Serbia over the past year, including everything related to the protests, the government's reaction to the protests, the police repression, attacks on journalists and the media, etc. So the report clearly identifies problems in the areas of democracy and governance. In the area of democracy, there is very strong language on the inadequacy of the general framework of elections and the lack of full implementation of the ODIHR recommendations. And on governance, for the first time, we see that the report is actually recognizing the very intensive debate on the president's overstepping of his constitutional role, as well as on the dysfunctionality of the parliament's proceedings. So the language there is quite clear and quite strong, considering that it's coming from the Commission. CSOs in Serbia also are clearly stated to operate in an increasingly difficult environment, and the report clearly states that since the start of the protests, that CSOs have faced intensified verbal attacks, smear campaigns, including by high-level officials, which is quite important. We have, for the first time, a recognition of backsliding in the fundamentals area. Last year, or the year before, I think it was the year before, there was the first ever instance of the recognition of backsliding, which was then in Chapter 31 on CFSP. But this year we have, as part of Chapter 23, the sub-chapter dealing with freedom of expression, states that environment for journalists, media professionals, and outlets has seriously worsened, and this is where they have recognized backsliding. Unfortunately, this has not, unfortunately, I sound like somebody who is cheering on the Commission to recognize backsliding, but I think that it is important at this point in time to call a spade and to be very clear about where Serbia stands. This backsliding in the freedom of expression has not translated into overall backsliding in Chapter 23, because there have been some aspects of this chapter which have seen some small improvements, although I have to say that these have been mostly related to adoption of legislation and strategies, so not really in terms of track record. But Chapter 23 marks no progress. Overall, we have now 9 chapters without progress, including Chapter 23, as I mentioned, and plus one area of a sub-area of fundamentals, public administration reform, which also is without progress. We also have 13 chapters with limited progress, 11 chapters with some progress, and absolutely no chapters with good progress. And this is in line with what the Commission has stated, that in the past year, really, there has been a complete standstill, almost a complete standstill in reforms. And I think that most of the year was kind of used to negotiate between the government, the EU, the European Commission, and the civil society in Serbia on the implementation of a few basic reform steps from the Serbian reform agenda, part of the New Growth Plan, especially related to the conditions for elections and the work of the media. These have been, let's say, the only EU-related reforms in the public eye, but they still remain unfinished. And what we see is that the report is not really establishing a very clear link with the implementation of the reform steps. We are still conducting an analysis because it takes a little bit more time, of course. But I could not see really that there is a clarity of how the implementation or non-implementation of reform steps is affecting the assessments. I will just give an example of anti-corruption area, which marks limited progress assessment, despite a very negative depiction of the situation in that area, and only one positive sentence on the adoption of the anti-corruption action plan for the period which is already expiring, for which the Commission in the monitoring committee on the Reform and Growth Facility, which took place earlier in October, clearly stated that this does not constitute the implementation of this reform step. and that they are awaiting for the government to adopt the action plan for the upcoming years in order to mark this step as completed. So the question arises, of course, why does Serbia have limited progress as opposed to no progress or even backsliding in the area of corruption, if not even this reform step from the reform agenda has been implemented? I leave this as a general question since we don't have the European Commission representative anymore with us, but today I discussed this with the EU ambassador in Serbia, and we have agreed that this is an important question to discuss additionally. I will just end with again, maybe it's a bleak way to finish, but it's necessary in the case of Serbia. In the two provisionally closed chapters, chapters 25 and 26, so science and research and education and culture, Serbia not only has no progress in these areas, but it has a very, very dire and bleak depiction of the current situation. It says that in the chapter 25, specific positive developments were overshadowed by negative developments affecting the autonomy of research institutes and universities. And this also goes for the area of education and culture. I'm just signaling this because these are supposed to be two easiest chapters in the accession negotiations. As I said, they are provisionally closed. Serbia has good overall level of preparedness still in this area, despite the fact that in reality our education and research systems have completely collapsed since the start of the protests and the government's response to these protests. Everything is very nicely explained and described in the report, so I call you to read this. But this is where I also have a question on why and how it is possible that the Commission has actually not, maybe not, I mean, maybe it would be too much to ask why they have not reopened the chapters, but why they have not signaled with their assessment also that there has been, in fact, backsliding in these areas. So there is always, as always before, we always have some questions and dilemmas about the Commission's methodology, and especially when it comes to the assessments. It is important to see that the actual analysis of the situation is quite good and quite on the spot. But as always, I think that the final assessments always get slightly politicized in the end, and I don't think that they fully mirror the situation in Serbia, although, as I said, at least for the first time, we do see that there is some recognition of backsliding in the fundamental areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Milena. Indeed, you've raised a lot of important issues and critical points. Unfortunately, Mr. Vineri is not here with us anymore, but he signaled that he will watch the entire video and then he will try to get back to us. And I should note as moderator that we have Commission members as part of the participants list still. We're reaching the end of the webinar, the official time for the webinar, the 90th minute, and we have 90% of the audience still being present. And I invite you all to please remain with us so that we have the possibility to listen to other partners as well, and for you, of course, to put your questions and comments in the last section. With that said, thank you, Milena, once again. I'm moving to North Macedonia, that is to Simonida and Epi, and I'm launching the poll on North Macedonia right away. Wait for 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll. Maybe more time could have been beneficial to have more responses, but nonetheless, we can see interesting findings. Right, a lot of people believe that there is some level of preparation for North Macedonia, whereas the other group is more inclined to give them better scores. And there is a mixed picture when it comes to progress, with most votes saying that Macedonia has stagnated throughout the past year. So with that, Simonida, you have the floor.
Thank you, Strahinja. Actually, the assessment is rather on the spot, because if we saw that 37% have actually said that the country is moderately prepared, which makes it a bit of a curious case, not of Benjamin Button, but of the alignment process. I'll try to be very brief. First, thanks to everyone for actually sticking with us, because we're evidently going to go over time. But North Macedonia has been in this for 20 years now. Yeah, we're going to celebrate probably very soon now the 20th anniversary of the candidate status. And the 20 years of basically of these assessments, 19 of the reports. So we have a bit of the track record is rather extensive. As a result of this, and I think that going back to what Milena was saying, the alignment in North Macedonia started off much earlier than in the others. So at this level, which is moderately prepared, which is around 3.1, was actually reached already in 2011, if we are being very honest. That's the level of preparation of the country, because most of the big alignments have been done back then, also in terms of big judicial reforms and other areas. There's also alignment in the agriculture or alignment in customs, where this country stands actually exceptionally well in comparison to the region. Since then, we've had a bit of the backsliding of 2015-16, a bit of positive developments around 18, but actually the level of preparedness, going back to what my colleagues were saying, has not actually evolved much. The movement is incremental, the word that was mentioned before. We have had our discussions among our group as to how conservative, how hesitant the Commission was for a long time, especially for the last decade, to actually raise the level of preparedness in many of the countries. Actually, this year is an exception. We have to be very honest. I mean, the level, what was discussed here in terms of Montenegro and Albania is the exception to the 15-year-old rule. So this is the first time that we've seen movements in preparedness in, was it 12 or 13 in Montenegro, 6 in Albania, and in North Macedonia it's basically just one, which is pre-movement of capital across the board because of the accession of SEPA. So if you ask me, we're now wrapping our analysis on our report. And my personal title would have been, are we happy with just SEPA? So that's what basically kind of describes the Macedonian report of last year. Not to minimize, I mean, as you saw, the alignment is actually very decent considering where the country is. It's around 3.1. We can debate whether it's with the areas. If we can weight actually the areas, then it might be even better, because there are areas such as, for example, food safety, where North Macedonia is the only country that has a good level of preparation from all the candidates, from all the 9 candidates. There is no other candidate that has a good level of preparation in food safety. And the country has had this from 2018. So this is a very difficult area. Albania has a 2, not a 4. So if we weight the areas, then it might even be better. But the question is, how far along can we get with incremental progress if the Commission is pushing in the next year, if not, like it was pushing in the year before? So that's our big question that we have in front of us. Also, in the broader context, on the fundamentals, the country has the basics. It has had it for a very long time, from 2005, when it was actually awarded the candidate status. But unfortunately, for the last 3 years, it has made no progress in the fight against corruption. And it has very weak progress in the judiciary. These are the 2 painful points, which somehow our process that, as we heard from the questions before, being stuck, does not provide an impetus to big political issues to be solved. On the numbers, if it's very interesting, we have in 8 chapters, we have better progress than last year. In 8 chapters, we have worse progress than last year. So basically, it's a 0. And probably what might be of interest is, of course, that we can see the positive examples of areas which are actually included in the reform agenda. I mentioned SEPA already. And we are still also looking to what Milena said, actually, the link with the reform agenda is something that we will have to kind of disentangle down the road. The traditionally good chapters, in addition to the food safety one, is actually customs. We are happy to see that chapter being back on track because that's also a very difficult chapter in terms of the customs union, being pushed also by the discussions on gradual integration and the proposals from the European Commission. Long story short, this in the overall package, the report of North Macedonia is not good because many countries have advanced much way better. And we are hoping that it will be read as a warning sign also on the side of the administration that we need to get our act together next year. If possible, putting aside the political discussions, if not, then the solving together with the political discussions, because as Daniel ended with an anecdote, our big risk is that actually we'll wake up in a couple of years seeing that we missed the only opportunity that we had probably while yelling that the EU is not really real on enlargement, and we're really hoping that that won't be the case. Thank you. And apologies for my voice. I was sick, but I spoke a lot on the report today, so it sounds a bit strange.
No, thank you very much. I also often quote a statement which says that North Macedonia is the saddest case of enlargement policy. It's something that we should all learn from, given that where it could have been and where it is now that we have basically one big zero in terms of progress when you take pluses and minuses. At least we have good food over there, as you say. Food is safe, so I invite people to try it out. But jokes aside, I think we all need to work together, and despite the blockage currently North Macedonia faces, I think that at least the think tanks can raise their voice and argue that North Macedonia is not to be neglected, despite all the difficulties. Now moving from one difficult place to another one, maybe even more. When I say difficult, I refer to Bosnia. I hope they don't take it as a negative thing. It's basically obvious, and Haris keeps saying this over and over, that Bosnia is facing a large number of issues that have yet to be resolved. And I'm launching the poll to see if other people share the similar view. And while you're replying, again, I'd like to stress that I'm very grateful for the fact that you're sticking still to this webinar and that you're so attentive. And we really appreciate it. It speaks volumes of your commitment as well. Given the number of people and guests, I didn't want to shorten anyone's speech. So thank you for your understanding in advance. So I'm going to close the poll in a couple of seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So Haris, here, as you can see, most people believe that there is some level of preparation for Bosnia, and that there is stagnation as the key syndrome. So please take the floor.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. It's always a pleasure to discuss Bosnia and Herzegovina in the context of EU enlargement, especially when the job this year was, let's say, quite easy. The European Commission published the report just yesterday, and not a single rating has changed compared to last year. So it was less work for me, but unfortunately also fewer reasons to be optimistic. The report confirms what we already know. Bosnia and Herzegovina is still politically divided, institutionally weak, and unsure about its European future. The Commission again highlights limited progress, especially the rule of law, public administration reform, the fundamental rights, which are ironically the areas that matter the most for a path to the EU. I'm going back to the poll. Most of the participants thought that we have Mark 2, that would be some level of preparation, but unfortunately we are at that level at only 2 clusters, or 3 if we take the fundamentals, when we calculate also the areas that are not chapters. So actually, the final mark is 167. That's really low. And as I said, this not a single rating has changed from last year because this last year it was actually the focus was on the political crisis that we had that also the commission recognized in that report. They made it clear that the coalition from Republika Srpska is blocking the European path. They continued attacks on state institutions. The constitutional court and the state level decisions are not just the political games, they are direct challenge to Bosnia and Herzegovina's credibility as a candidate country. And the sad truth is that while Brussels keeps talking about enlargement, part of our political establishment will talk about the separation. Still, there's one positive development, not in Sarajevo, but in Brussels. The new growth plan for the Western Balkans is a welcome change in the EU approach. It finally offered something concrete, access to parts of the single market and more for financial support in the return for real reforms. Is actually the first time that the EU has made the integration feel real before full membership. Unfortunately, Bosnia and Herzegovina, as you all probably know, has been slow again. As this, we were supposed to submit the reform agenda quite a while ago, but we delayed, and we are actually the only country in the region that didn't have that didn't adopt the reform agenda until recently, and that agenda is still in Brussels under the review. I also really appreciate the commissioner's Marta Kos visit in Sarajevo recently and her clear, direct message, because she didn't actually sugarcoat anything. She explained exactly what kind of project we lost by not acting faster, and I think the authorities to I think that her visit actually played an important role in finally pushing our authorities to adopt the reform agenda, even if it happened under pressure. Sometimes I think the Brussels needs to use a bit of tough love, and it works. At least because that wasn't the case before, because uh, the representatives of the European Union actually weren't that vocal about what we are losing by not making changes and progressing towards the European Union. And I think this whole situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina is a direct result of that. And to conclude, the report tells actually a familiar story that the EU door is open, but we are still standing at the threshold, arguing over who should not first. And until we overcome this political paralysis, especially the obstruction from Republika Srpska, we'll just keep talking about Europe instead of moving toward it. Thank you.
Thank you, Haris. It's unfortunate that Marta Kos wasn't here to listen to your speech. I think she would have been glad to hear that her visit really made the change and that it brought some sense to politicians in Bosnia. But nonetheless, we hope she'll watch this video. And thank you, Haris, for sure. And now, last but not least, I would like to turn attention to Njoza and GLPS. To Kosovo, a place where that is facing its own set of issues, with the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, it's still waiting for the candidate status. It's the only potential officially candidate, and it's still waiting for a response, right, for its application process as well. That was submitted in the eve of in the aftermath of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So before I officially give you the floor, Njoza, just to give one last poll to the audience to assess the level of preparedness and progress in Kosovo. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll. Sorry if I interrupted somebody. News, as you can see here, we have some mixed picture with the most votes giving the rating 2 on a scale from 1 to 5, whereas the group still believes that Kosovo apparently has a lot of work ahead of it. And when it comes to the question on progress, most people believe that there was a stagnation, probably in the context of your election and post-electoral development. So I give you the floor to illuminate us with your view of the findings and of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Strahina, and thank you all for sticking with us until the end. Actually, the polling perfectly depicts where Kosovo stands on the basis of the analysis we have done for this year. Unfortunately, this year's report shows that this year has been rather difficult and challenging for us, with many missed opportunities because of the ongoing political crisis. I must say that the most used words and predominant words for this year's report can be two: stagnation and limited progress. Despite our voiced commitment towards the European Union, we haven't been able, because of the political realities, to make any advancements towards our path on the EU, and it's felt throughout the report. So the repercussions of the political situation are felt in all chapters and all clusters for this year's report. I must say that for more than half of the reporting period, Kosovo was under a caretaker government. So we're talking about two different assessment periods. And this has led perhaps to this stagnation and limited progress for 2025. Adding to this, Kosovo continues to face the consequences of the EU-imposed measures, which have been only started to be gradually lifted this May. These measures, of course, have slowed cooperation and have affected Kosovo's participation in several EU-supported mechanisms, and this is something also to be taken into consideration. In terms of quantification of data, I must first state that Kosovo differs from other countries of the region when being assessed, because precisely because of not having the candidate status. So not all chapters are evaluated, but when measuring Kosovo's level of preparedness across the negotiating chapters that we could evaluate, the country registered a small improvement during 2025. So from 2.02 last year, we went to 2.11 for 2025. This is because the Commission notes improvements in 4 chapters, including Chapter 14 on transport policy and Chapter 30 on external relations. This mostly because of deblocking SEFTA. And the 2 other chapters that improvements have been noted is Chapter 12 on food safety and Chapter 19 on social development and employment. However, this might sound as a progress in paper, but it really remains marginal, because Kosovo is still considered at, let's say, between some early stage or some level of preparation in general. As for progress levels, the Commission highlights that Kosovo has shown limited progress in 17 chapters, some progress in 11 chapters, no progress at all in 2 chapters, and only 1 chapter, again, Chapter 19 on social policy and employment, has received a positive evaluation of good progress. And this is mainly because of the reforms that took place in our labor inspectorate, and because of the social assistance and youth guarantee schemes that have been piloted in 2024 and 2025. Zooming in into the report details, in terms of political criteria, the report acknowledges that the elections held back in February were fair and free. This demonstrates once again that Kosovo maintains a functioning democratic process when it comes to fair and free elections. However, as I said previously, the report rightfully emphasizes the political deadlock and criticizes the long delays in forming the new institutions. It has been 10 months since February, and as I speak, we are not yet sure whether we are going to have a government within these 15 days, or we are going to go on extraordinary elections. The latter is maybe most the probability is to happen. Of course, the electoral campaign that took place in February was deeply polarized and confrontational. This led to very divisive narratives between the political scene in Kosovo, and it only deepened the institutional crisis because it made it harder for the parties to reach, let's say, a political consensus to form a new government in Kosovo. It's safe to say that since December last year, or even earlier than that, the focus of political scene in Kosovo has shifted towards the election campaigns, and it resulted in a year that was dominated by politics rather than governance. So that is something that also has hampered Kosovo's progress in EU reforms. We also have failed to ratify the reform agenda on behalf of the growth plan because our assembly was not able to do so far, and we are facing high risks to not be able to properly benefit from the funds coming from the growth plan for Kosovo. It has been more than 10 months. Although both agreements have been pushed forward by the government, they are still to be ratified in the parliament. And we know this is a competitive process. Funds that are not being able to be spent by one country can be later on transferred to the countries that demonstrate progress. So this is something that we have to be very careful and should be treated with urgency in order for us to be able to benefit from the growth plan and the financial part allocated for Kosovo. I will just briefly mention public administration reform because we consider it's a precondition for EU accession. The report notes only limited progress. It still reiterates the recommendations that have been provided last year. They were only partially addressed, in particular to the law on public officials and the Constitutional Court ruling on law and salaries, where Kosovo has took some steps, but there's lack of job classification and systematization of positions within the public administration, which fails to be in place. Along the same lines as GLPS, the report also puts emphasis on the large number of managerial positions that are being held with acting officials. The latest report that was published by the ministry for 2024 shows that 72% of top-level positions within our administration are occupied by acting heads, which is something that should be also addressed by the upcoming government as soon as possible. Chapters like judiciary and fundamental rights and other chapters that are within the fundamentals remain more or less the same as the last year. So there has been some improvements in tackling high-level corruption, but on the other hand, final convictions for non-high-level corruption have decreased during this assessment period. I would also put some particular focus on media freedom, only because this is something that has been mentioned in the report as something that there is a declining trend noted in the media freedom in Kosovo, with large number of attacks and intimidations against media. During this period, 70 attacks physical and verbal attacks have happened against journalists, and they were reported, including threats from high senior ranking officials and also the prime minister during the election campaign happening in Kosovo. Also, there's a law on media commission, which was annulled by the Constitutional Court because it had some questionable provisions. So the new law should be put in place. But really, media is a part where Kosovo has been declining in 2025. The last, but I must say most important and complex issue is, of course, Kosovo's path towards accession is closely tied to the normalization of relations with Serbia. There has been notably no progress in this regard. Dialogue still remains at a deadlock since the Banska attack. And because of the political instability, no progress was made in implementing the Ohrid Agreement on the path towards normalization. Although the report mentions that talks have continued, we must say that they were merely formal and rather than substantial. So no high-level meetings took place since the Banska attack. It's important to also note that the normalization process for both countries, Kosovo and Serbia, is also tied to the benefits from the growth plan are also tied to the path of normalization, and this is clearly stated in this year's report. We consider that a balanced approach should be used in regards to the normalization process, and of course Kosovo has to tackle the issue of retrieving and restraining from arbitrary approaches in the northern of Kosovo and ensuring sustainability is sustained, and on the other hand for Serbia to stop the lobbying campaigns as the report states, and providing for justice for perpetrators of Banska attack. There are a couple of other chapters that minor improvements have happened, but these were the main ones. So to conclude, we haven't achieved any transformative progress this year that could be considered like a breakthrough or essential for moving closer to EU integration. Thank you.
Thank you, Njoza. For me, it resonated quite strongly when you said that often politics takes precedence over governance. In practice, this is something that's well existing in my country, but in other parts of the region as well. And I think something needs to be done. That if this continues this way, that we'll lose this enlargement momentum. So besides normalization that is mandatory and part of the reform agenda and negotiating framework, I do believe that going beyond that, indeed, more emphasis needs to be placed on governance and less on politics, indeed. Thank you very much. And now to have one final speaker, last but not least, actually, Srđan Majstorović. I couldn't find a better person, actually, to put as a cherry on top of this very interesting and fruitful debate. To conclude and to maybe give us some forward-looking thoughts on what is to be expected maybe by the next Enlargement Package 2026. Thanks. And to invite the audience, because we won't have too much time, to place questions if they have any at this late hour. Thanks. Srđan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Strahinja. And I feel a huge responsibility because there is still 100 plus participants attending this webinar. So kudos to you and the team who organized this presentation of this year's enlargement package. My task is to put a sort of a helicopter overview and to wrap this things up. And by looking at this year's enlargement package, I cannot escape from the notion that in general, this is a very positive development. I would say for the first time in the last 5 to 8 years, there was a public interest to actually read what is written in the European Commission reform, which is quite contrary to the previous years. The language which is used is different. It is closer to reality. And this obviously helps. So I think regardless of the melange of the results of the progress among the countries in the region, this enlargement package is different and should be perceived in positive note. I would go back to the start of today's session and once again reiterate the importance of being earnest. And that is the importance of political commitment. political commitment in a way in this year's enlargement package was recognized as a serious indicator that separates candidate countries one from the other, especially those who are pushing forward, those primarily being Montenegro, Albania, but I would not exclude Moldova as well, and to some extent Kosovo, because there is a commitment of society, but obviously, as for the reasons that Njomza explained, there is a lack of the capacity to realize that potential. I will keep myself very short, and I would give you a couple of key impressions on how did I read this year's package. Couple of them are positive. I would say that regardless of the very negative security-wise context, I would say that we rediscovered the geopolitical importance of the EU enlargement. And I would put a title on it, Eppur si muove. You know, it's still evolving. It moves. So in a sense, this year's enlargement package is a success of courage, of vision and knowledge over the conventional dogma of how the enlargement was stuck in a crisis, an impasse, and overburdened by the lack of appetite for the enlargement. So in the words of Galileo, you know, this is a really a success of the new thinking, if you wish, and the EU has in a way regained its appeal, and this is very important, bearing in mind how dismal our discussions were just a couple of days ago, maybe even last year. I would also say that, and I would like to stress this, that there is an important contribution by the think tank community in finding the innovative ways to move forward from the previous impasse. The elements of stage accession are present in the gradual integration, are present in the growth plan, are present in this idea of the future accession treaties containing a stronger safeguards against backsliding. These are all inputs which were provided by the think tank community. And mind you, a think tank community from the Western Balkans. I'm not going to say and to feel to brag that people from European Policy Center contributed significantly to these ideas. But this should be acknowledged on a broader European level. The second positive take would be that we started to talk about dates. And this is something that I recognized for the first time in the past 10, 12 years in these reports. European Commission started to officially acknowledge the importance of the time frame for the individual EU accession of the candidate countries. This was never the case before. Now, the European Commission is brave enough to say that when Montenegro says that by 2026 they're going to finalize the internal preparations, that Commission finds it very realistic. Same goes for Albania in 27, not to be forgotten again for Moldova in 28. So this needs to be recognized. This might sound, you know, symbolic, but it's a crucial step towards a better communication of the EU's enlargement, both in the candidate countries as well as internally towards the EU citizens, to be aware that the enlargement is on, that this is a process which is credible and that everybody should prepare for that. And finally, the third positive thing is could be labeled that the change is good. And the change happened in Berlaymont. We have a new commissioner who brought her own new style of leadership. It shows in the way that she keeps relations with the different leaders in the candidate countries, where she recognized the commitment. She is not shying away from praising the leaders, but where she sees the backsliding, she was very brave and not shy of openly criticizing the countries who are backsliding, and Serbia being obviously one of them at the top of the list. It shows that this new leadership shows in a way of communication with the public in the candidate countries. My predecessors talked about it, but also in inclusion of the civil society organizations into the EU integration process. And finally, this leadership shows in the substance of this report. As I said, it's much more realistic, it's much more straightforward, and it seems to me that when compared to the previous year's reports, there were no political or ideological filter that these reports were maybe taken through in the previous iterations of the Commission. However, regardless of these positives, there are some still concerns, and I would shortly address them. We know what is the goal. So the EU membership is the goal for the candidate countries, and enlargement is the important strategic policy for the European Union. However, the map, the GPS system is still missing. And this is something that I'm concerned with. We were expecting the report on pre-enlargement policy review and reform to already be published. Unfortunately, we are still waiting. There are some news that it's going to be published soon, but this is not a good message, and it needs to be recognized as such. Because in order to know where we are heading, we need to know that there is a credible intention within the EU to adjust this decision-making process, to adjust the influence of enlargement of the EU policy, that there are budgetary repercussions that needs to be taken into consideration. So all these issues needs to be addressed in order to attain the full credibility of the enlargement process. And obviously, the think tank community is there to help, to support, and to be very vigilant once this report is published. And we are obviously going to contribute with our comments and suggestions. The second issue that is still of a concern, regardless of these positive developments that I explained, is that unfortunately the Western Balkan region is still suffering from the issues concerning the bilateral relations. And in that sense, these bilateral issues within the region are still could still present not only a challenge, but rather an entering point for foreign and especially malign influences in the region. Region is a very delicate, functions as a system of connected vessels, and there are those ready to abuse any potential for spreading conflicts in the region. And here we still do not have a clear answer how to address these issues in a more vigilant and more efficient way within the process of the EU enlargement. And finally, and this is where I'm going to conclude, the third concern that I see might sound a bit like an over cautionary concern, but I'm concerned of division of the region in different groups. This is a normality and reality that we are living with. But this uneven progress with Montenegro and Albania being forerunners and in a way separating from the region, Serbia and Kosovo being mutually locked into this impasse, Bosnia and Herzegovina still being unable to find the right way out of these structural issues, internal structural issues, and the North Macedonia being taken hostage, basically, of bilateral relations with the EU neighbors. These are all issues which may influence the regional cooperation and regional integration. Issues concerning common regional market, CEFTA functioning, transport community, green agenda for the Western Balkans. These are all issues that needs to be addressed in regional way. But by creating these divisions within the region, this might lead to some of the countries being left behind while others run away in a way, in a sense, from the troubled rest of the region. And this is all being in a context with regional cooperation and reconciliation being a precondition for the countries of stabilization association process, can contribute to some regional rivalries, which needs to be cautiously looked upon and finally, how to put it, driven into the safety of the accession of the whole region eventually to the EU. So I would say that the glass is more full rather than empty, but there are some issues that needs to still be addressed in order to retain the full credibility of the enlargement process. So I'll stop here, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Surgeon, for your surgically precise, I would say, assessment of all the flaws and advantages of the ongoing approach to enlargement, both when it comes to the ongoing new shift in the Commission with Marta Kos being on top of it, while, of course, outlining all the difficulties that we face moving forward in the region as well. I hope that the audience as well has enjoyed all the experts' input and feedback when it comes to the Enlargement Package 2025. I should also note that the debate has been quite data-driven, but also full of qualitative assessments, which is why I encourage you to check our website on YouTube and rewatch or revisit the debate if needed moving forward. And to conclude, I would also would like to personally thank you for sticking with us for entire 2-hour webinar. This is quite a feature, and I invite you to follow us, to follow Think for Europe network, really a partnership that has stood the test of time and has shown that the Western Balkans can truly work together no matter how difficult the times may be, and that we have more similarities than differences. And finally, of course, to me, thank you once again for all the support. We as a European Policy Center, but other partners for the region as well, really appreciate the hard work and commitment that has stayed constant despite the changing developments in the world. Thank you all. The questions have been replied in written by the speakers as well. We had 2 of those. And thank you. I'm concluding the webinar. Stay in touch, and good luck to Western Balkans, and good luck to a new commission as well. Thank you.